All right, so today we're talking about the 13 colonies. And those are the 13 original colonies that would eventually make up the United States of America. These were all colonies of Great Britain, which hopefully we've talked about a good bit, and you have a bit of an understanding of both why why Britain first set up these colonies here, and also why eventually the colonies decided that they wanted to break away. The colonies are originally made up of 3 different sections. There's the New England colonies, the Middle colonies, and the Southern colonies. And it's important to know that because these different colonies have some very distinct differences that make them unique from each other. We're going to start up in the far north with the New England colonies. If you ever wondered why we have a team in the NFL called the New England Patriots when we do not have a state or city called New England, it's because that is an area of the United States. New England Patriots actually play, and by play I mean cheat, in Massachusetts in here. However, the New England area represents Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Vermont. However, some of those are not included in the original 13 colonies. Part of that being Maine is not one of the original 13 colonies. Maine was land that Massachusetts claimed and said was part of Massachusetts, which is kind of funny because New Hampshire kind of blocks it off. Later on, it's going to be called its own state, and Massachusetts will drop any claims to Maine. Another part I said there in Vermont, and Vermont is actually right here, and it's colored in purple on your map. Vermont is not an original state, one of the 13 colonies, and it was therefore not going to be one of our original states. It was actually claimed by both New York and New Hampshire in the middle there. Once we become our own country, eventually they're going to squabble over it until they decide to just make it its own state of Vermont later on. Rhode Island is also this little thing over here. Okay, now the New England colonies have a couple unique things about them. First off, they're what we call charter colonies. Charter colonies mean that they were set up by the King of England, but they were given off to individual people who were able to build their own colonies and their own rules. Most of the people came here for religious freedom. That means that they are Protestant, mostly, very Puritan, like the Pilgrims up here, okay? And they are very pro lots and lots of freedoms, okay? So that is New England. Now we're going to go over here to the Middle colonies, which are these lovely mustard colored, and those include Delaware, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York. These colonies are probably the easiest to understand because they're kind of like a mesh of the other two, smushed in between. Kind of makes sense. They're in the middle, right? The Middle colonies are also charter colonies set up by individuals to make kind of their own areas, right? But also they are very, very diverse. I love writing with this pen here. But they're very diverse, meaning there's a lot of different types of people there, a lot of different religions and cultures, kind of all smushed in between. And they, for the most part, have religious freedom, which makes sense because it's so diverse that they would need to be able to accept people from all different groups. But that's pretty unique. Pennsylvania's and Rhode Island also in New England, but New England, that kind of is an outlier, but Pennsylvania kind of led the way there with religious freedom. But then we're going to move on into the Southern colonies. The Southern colonies includes Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. All of these over here, I'm going to make these pink because that'll take up Southerners, and that's kind of funny to me. The Southern colonies are not charter colonies. They are what we call royal colonies. And royal colony means these were directly created for the King of England. They are there to make money, okay? That is their one and only goal. We are going to try and make money. Some of them are more successful than others. Our first successful colony was Jamestown, which is here in between Virginia and North Carolina. That was our first city we set up. We've already talked about that in class. But those colonies, again, like we talked about with Jamestown, their goal is to see how much money they can make in tax and trade. Tobacco, later on cotton, they're very agricultural areas. Virginia is also the largest of all of the colonies. These colonies are Anglican. That means they belong to the Church of England, just like Great Britain, which makes sense. These are direct add-ons to Great Britain, so that by law, they follow the Church of England. Okay. Now you go down. Virginia is the largest, like I already said. The Carolinas were originally one, like you can imagine. Then they were split to make it easier, and they were very, very valuable. They make a lot of money. Ka-ching. Okay. Early on, they were worried that there was going to be an attack and that these very valuable colonies could be plundered by somebody who's not too fond of Great Britain, particularly someone that's further down. Now, if you know a map of the United States today at all, you should know that below Georgia comes a state called Florida. Florida did not used to belong to the United States. Florida used to be part of Spain. And Spain and Great Britain were not the best of friends, so Great Britain decided to add an extra colony to give them a bit of a buffer between Spain and their very valuable Carolinas, and they created Georgia. Georgia was actually made to have prisoners, and so they send their prisoners across the ocean. These are people who were put in prison for anything from pretty terrible crimes to probably just being poor. But they were sent to Georgia, and that was their prison was them working in Georgia. Okay, if anyone knows some kind of worldwide history that kind of sounds similar to that of Australia. Australia as a country is actually only created because after the United States breaks away, Great Britain no longer has any place to ship off their prisoners, so they create a new country for it. Altogether, the New England, Middle, and Southern colonies do not have a ton in common. The basically only thing that holds them together is the idea that they exist on this at this point in time, other side of the world, and this British history that they have together. It's not until the time of the American Revolution where they start having issues that they start seeing more similarities and realizing that they might want to work together more than separate. But early on, they definitely would have considered themselves independent of each other. And by that I mean a New Yorker would have considered themselves a New Yorker. A person from Massachusetts would have considered themselves from Massachusetts. There wasn't been any of this kind of concept of being from America yet. When we're going to continue on, we're going to start looking more and more at the different issues that are going to start making these colonies angry with the way Britain is ruling them and start building a desire for wanting to be independent.